comes out at the top. Whichever point is lower is where the water goes in. Water comes out at the top then. Good. Okay. Good. All right. Just make sure that everybody, because if not, if you put it reverse way, it's just not going to do anything, and you're not going to have anything happen. Yes.
What's the difference?
What?
What's the difference?
Water coming in through here. It's emptying out. So as soon as it touches here, it's emptying out. So it'll only probably won't fill up to when it rains, and it won't fill up. So you have cooling it. If you don't trust us, try it out. I would rather not even waste time trying it out. Okay?
Yes.
Trust us. In, out.
You can take my word for it on this one. We can make our lives a lot easier then. Okay, so you're going to let this sit in reflux for 20 minutes. Now, when you see refluxing is we consider it to start refluxing when you see it start to boil, but when it comes up and it starts condensing and drips back down. So when you see this actually boiling and it's falling back down into the solution, that's when you consider refluxing to start. That's when you start your time. So don't just, it's not going to be when it starts boiling necessarily, but when you see it start dripping and condensing back down into your solution while still boiling, that's what we call refluxing. So,
Couple of things. When you're doing the setup, should I be clamping?
Middle.
On bottom for sure, tightly. And this is delicate, so make sure you clamp this loose. It should be tight, but it should be, just in case like something happened, tip over, it should be able to. The second thing, notice that in the setup and in my setup, there is nothing like the top. Okay, so we have pressure building up here, and if you have this closed, then it'll pop off. Okay, and that happens. So make sure that this is up. And nothing's going to evaporate away. Why?
Good.
Condensing back down.
Right? You have all of whatever's going to evaporate is going to go back down. That's the whole point of refluxing. Okay, so the point of refluxing is basically to have a constant mixing and a constant temperature, right? So your solvent won't boil unless it's at the right point. It'll evaporate and come back down. So you have this constant cycle going on that will keep the temperature constant. And the second thing is nothing will evaporate away. So you can set up refluxes for a couple days at a time, and you'll be pretty set.
you just let it sit there and it's going to react on its own and go away. Does anybody have any questions about reflux?
You want to see it work. So the 20-minute starts when you see it working.
Yeah, and people, you remember we always start everything about 4 when you're doing your sand bath, so just crank it on about there. If you don't see it, if it doesn't start boiling for a long time, you can turn it up a little bit. If it starts boiling, you see it looks like it's starting to get really hot, you can turn it down a little bit. But about 3 or 4 is a good temperature to have it
And
set.
another point, when you add your sulfuric acid to sodium bromide, you don't expect it to sort of bubble up. Sometimes it will bubble up so intensely that it will come up to the top and spill over. To prevent that, we're going to add the condenser, and when you add the sulfuric acid, add it through the condenser on the top. Okay?
And this is also just a side point that's going to be helpful. So when you come and get one of these, this is shared between all the labs, so that means it's not clean. So just be very careful with that. I would say the best bet to do is just clean it out. You can use a little bit of acid in there to wash it out before you do anything, because if you try to react it and this thing is dirty, because I've seen this happen before, it's just going to make a big old clump that looks like orange Play-Doh you've made in there. So, and that's not what we're looking for this one. So just make sure it's clean before you start out, because otherwise it'll mess everything up. You can use just a little bit and then add a little bit of water to it. It'll be okay. That's the way it worked out really well. We did that way. So, all right. So this one, so as you see, it says we need to make sure that the round bottom flask is cool before we remove the condenser. So this is at the end of that 20 minutes. You let it sit in reflux. This needs to be cool. So before you move on to anything, it can't be hot. It needs to be cool to the touch. So let it cool in an ice bath. Just let it sit there. You'll be okay. Just until it cools off.
Why are we waiting for this to cool down? What would happen if I'm trying to switch between my reflux?
It would keep going, boiling and evaporating.
Right, so if everything evaporates, you'll have no results for your 15.5 liters. Make sure that this is cool. Take this off.
Okay, so then next we'll move on to distillation then. And you guys have done distillation, but this is going to be just a little bit different in the one that we're doing this week. So in this one, you're going to add a few more boiling tips. You're going to keep the same round bottom plastic you're going to be using. Just got your product in it. Add a couple more boiling tips to it. Make sure that you've got this in an ice bath so it stays cool. And then when you start distilling, okay, I'm sorry. You're going to keep distilling until you see it stop pouring out. So remember, it's going to come drip constantly. If you see it's been 5 minutes between drips, that means you're pretty much done. You've collected all that you're going to. I think we have a nice picture of that. There we go. And I think, did you guys get this sent to you? An email too? You did? Okay, so hopefully everybody has one. If not, then we do have one kind of set up here. Over you. Just a second. Okay, so this is missing part of it, I think. Yeah. So it's just minus this one little part in the round bottom flask here. So this is going to be how your distillation is going to be set up. So you might remember we used the simple kits before. We used a simple distillation, used a straight column. But this is going to be a little bit more complicated. So this one, as you can see, this is going to be where we'll have our product. So this is going to have your little product in it, sitting there with the little boiling chips, just happy, chilling here on this side of the distillation apparatus. So you can see we've got the alcohol thermometer. Make sure you use the alcohol thermometer. Please don't use the mercury ones. But you're going to have it set up like this. And then this is going to be your condenser that you've been using then. And like before, when we said that water goes in at the bottom, comes out at the top, it's just like this. This is going to be considered the bottom, so your water goes in here. It's going to pour out here at the top. Make sure you got your little tube going to the sink. And also make sure you put these on well when you put it on. Otherwise, if somebody turns up the water pressure, then this can shoot off and you're going to have water going everywhere. And everybody's going to get wet and unhappy. So just make sure if you don't want to get wet, you put everything on tight the first time. Also, when you use the water, you don't have to crank this on high gear, super high throttle, anything like that. No. A little bit goes a long way, like the stopcock grease. Just a little bit goes a long way. You just want to make sure that it's just enough to make it from the bottom to pour it out of the top gently. So like this edge right here, you just want to make sure it fills all the way up there. So don't crank it in overdrive or anything like that. So, in this one, as you can see, it's got it set up right here, but also you're going to have it collecting in a round bottom flask like this. So you'll have this collecting from here down here. It's just missing this little, my example is missing the bottom part. But as you can see, it's going to collect right here, and you'll stop the distillation after, like I said, about 45 minutes between drops. If you don't see anything, you can assume your distillation is pretty much done. You've got as much as you'll be able to get then. Yes. You'll still be using a sand bath to eat it. So, and you might have noticed these are differing in heights just a little bit, and the way this one is, you're going to have this collecting flask a little bit lower than the other ones. So you can use a sand bath to heat this one over here. If you need to use your hot plate as a prop, you can. Just don't turn it on or anything like that. Make sure you're using your sand bath, but this one does need to be higher than the bottom one over here. No, that's a good question. Because this is a condenser and we have water running through it, you don't have to do anything with a paper towel, wetting it, or anything like that. So this is going to be able to cool it. And also, when you collect it here, this needs to be in an ice bath. So that way, when your distillate comes in here, it'll be able to condense fully in the tube, or in the flask. Any other questions about the distillation apparatus? And we'll have this set up, and you should have a copy of this too for the experiment. Okay. After we use this, and you collect your distillate, we get to use a separatory funnel again. Woo! All right. So you take your organic product. You're going to add 10 milliliters of water and mix it then. Then you're going to open it up, get the organic layer. If you looked on your sheet, is the organic layer the one we want on top or bottom? Bottom. Right, so this time it's on the bottom. So just make sure that you save the bottom one. If you're unsure about anything, save everything until the end of the experiment, just so you don't, unfortunately, throw your product away. So you want to get the bottom layer, and then we're going to wash it again. This time we're going to...
You put the bottom layer back into the alcohol and then
So collect it in a flask, pour it back in, and you'll be able to do another separation on it. So we're going to wash with aqueous sodium bicarbonate. So let's think, if we've got a little bit of acid in there, and you're adding a base like sodium bicarbonate, what does that mean is going to happen? It's going to make gas. And so if you're not careful, the first time that you invert this, pressure is going to build up. So make sure that you either turn your stopcock if you've got it inverted, or if you turn it really quickly, take your top off, because that top will shoot off. So make sure when you're doing this, you do it in the fume hood and point it away from your teammates' eyes and my eyes too, please. So this is also really important to make sure you're wearing your goggles in this experiment, because we will be dealing with, like I said, acid. We'll be seeing, hopefully we won't see any flying tops of the separatory funnel during the experiment. But just make sure that you're venting appropriately, because if pressure builds up, then something could happen that we don't want to. And then, as you can see here, if it's a little bit cloudy, you can add a little bit of sodium sulfate. But if you see something like an emulsion happen, which is going to occur between your two phases, just let it sit there. It'll be okay. It'll eventually go away on its own. Just let it chill for a few minutes. It'll be okay. And then we're going to take it out and dry it. Okay.
Okay, so
you store it for next week, that you just put it in a sample file. We've got a whole huge box of sample files up here. Grab one. You can, if you want to get a Sharpie and write your name on it, you can, so you know which one is yours if they get mistaken. And then you put a little bit of paraffin around the top, because if it evaporates during the week, that would be very, very upsetting.
So a couple of things for this week. Before you start, find a group. So you can exchange it with. So one person brings fentanyl, and find a group to go with. Next week, when you come back, you're working on IRs and NMRs on your product this lab. And I would also like to check out next week. So this is how it's going to happen next week. Three people in a group. One person goes to NMR, one person goes to IR, third person is going to check it. Hopefully be out of here in this round, which means 2 weeks from that, we have our final exam goes come in, write your exam, instead of coming in and checking out for an hour and then writing the exam. Okay, good with that? Which means get your keys then. So your final 15-point lab report will end in 15 to the
Okay, also, you will be working in the fume hood. We're on this experiment this week, so just make sure when you're using it, you can do 2 people in a fume hood, except for the middle fume hood, so the middle one here and the middle one in the back, just one group working that one, so that way we won't get too congested. There's also one back here in the back, the first one, next to where your organic waste and everything is. That one is open, so if you want to work there, so if you aren't too crowded, you can do that. But yeah, so just be careful and try not to get too crowded in here or anything like that. Any questions about the lab? All right, we go ahead and get started.